Welcome back to How to Tickle Yourself. I'm your host, Duff McDonald, along with your co-host, Joey of Rockledge.
Hello.
Our guest today comes to us courtesy of the great Betty McKeon, astrologer and mother-in-law par excellence. She is one of our favorite listeners and has suggested more guests for this show than anyone else. So thank you, Betty, for everything, for being you, but also for doing the hard work of figuring out who we should be interviewing. Mandara Cromwell is the author of the book Soundflower, The Journey to Marry Science and Spirit. A veteran entrepreneur, Mandara has been on a lifelong mission to prove via science what she has always known to be true in her heart, and that is that sound, the essence of the universe, has the power to heal. To that end, she spent several decades refining what she calls cymatherapy, healing using sound frequency with an understanding of the energetic meridians of the human body. We will let her explain the technical details herself, but suffice it to say, she believes that love is a vibration and it can heal all maladies. She has been led from early on, from a very young age, by grace. She's always asked the universe, what now? And those questions have been met by very intense visions that have led her life to unfold one step at a time. In other words, she has learned to listen, how to listen to the sound that is reality itself. Her book is a wonderful journey of spiritual discovery. It's not just about healing via sound either. Sound also creates visual patterns, and those patterns, which are spread throughout the book, and they're so beautiful, can impact your energy field and health on their own. So it's not just sound, it's also the picture of sound. Some listeners may be familiar with mandalas as well as Sri Yantras, mystical diagrams of the divine principle. Those are pretty much the same thing, or roughly the, oh my God, what happened here? Oscar, cut that. Her book is a wonderful journey of spiritual discovery. It's not just about healing via sound. Sound also creates visual patterns, and those patterns can impact your energy field and health on their own. So it's not just the sound, it's the picture of the sound. This is what mandalas are all about, as well as Sri Yantras, mystical diagrams of the divine principle. But I am already getting in over my head here. So let's let Mandara tell us all about soundflowers and their potential for healing, not just the body, but the spirit. Welcome to the show, Mandara. It's great to see you.
Thank you. It's great to be with the both of you.
At the present moment, traveling town to town, the mystery of the motion, right here, right now. Right here, right now. Whoa, right here, right now.
So can we just jump right in and we'll get a little bit of background first. How did you come to sound therapy? How did that become part of your life?
From an early age, I grew up in a family with a strong, devout Catholicism foundation. And we attended a Gothic-style architecture church. And on those walls were beautiful paintings, angels, and gorgeous stained glass windows with saints, and they had their halos. And I would every Sunday find myself tugging on my dad's suit coat, calling his attention to something that I had discovered that was hidden within the architecture that I'd never noticed before. And finally, one day, he leaned down and he said, "Shh, you won't be able to hear them talking if you keep speaking to me." And so now, okay, how do you receive that from a parent to a child? Is your parent telling you, be quiet, Or, in my view, he was saying the angels painted on the ceiling who had these gold hats. I really wanted one of those gold hats that was vibrating. I wouldn't be able to hear what they're saying if I kept talking to him. So that was my first indication that be still and listen rather than, speaking. And so that
it took me 50 years to figure that out. I've been talking the entire time.
He's still working on it a little.
Sorry, please continue.
Human nature, right? So anyway, and my grandfather used to say I was a very inquisitive child, that I was the only person that he met that had asked why at the end of every breath, because I was just really curious about how does this work? Why is this happening, etc. So that was really the beginning of how to listen. And the more I listened in the church, and now I have to say, let me just marry a little science right here. I think it was Sir Edward Appleton, the Nobel laureate, that said the golden ratio explains all of the physics of the universe, or something like that. So let's just go to that experience that I had as a child in a Gothic style cathedral, because those arcs, those buttresses, the pillars, everything is built on the golden ratio. And so then you put a pipe organ in the choir loft, and that sound is reverberating all throughout that architecture. It's very moving, and I would love it when, as a child, I attended a Catholic elementary school, and the nuns would come to the door and say someone had passed away, and we were all allowed as school in the school choir to ascend to that very special place of the choir loft to sing the Latin Requiem. And as I was looking down upon the attendees of the funeral rites and, smelling the incense, there's nothing like really fabulous frankincense burning, right? And, feeling that reverberation, I could feel under my skin the vibratory oscillations that I could almost take flight.
Wow.
And just everything in that particular setting came alive to me as a child. So sound, feeling that within the architecture of the church, within the architecture of my physical body, I felt what we call now Shakti, the spiritual energy vibrating at a really wonderful rate. So that was my introduction to sound. The architecture, the organ, the Latin, and that has followed me throughout my whole life. And we'll get into the next chapter after, but that's the beginning.
And so how, maybe we don't know this, but how does sound heal? How are we healed by sound? Can you talk about that just a bit?
Gosh, there's so much written about it. But let me just tell you very briefly. I'll mention Dr. Alfred Tomatis, who was a French physician, and he actually created the electronic ear. And he has an interesting story about monks living in the south of France who were slumping in their cells after the Vatican proclaimed that they were going to change the masses from Latin, which is when you speak Latin or certain languages, they touch different parts of your mouth and release neurotransmitters. So anyway, Tomatis found that Latin Gregorian chant was really fast energy food, because a new abbot had come into this monastery and said, hey, the Vatican says we don't need to be chanting, 15 times a day, they would take a break for like 10 minutes and, pray, and then go back to making their bread and their wine to serve the community, right? Well, this new abbot came in and said, hey, you don't need to do that anymore. And it wasn't long before the monks were slumping in their cells. So when Tomatis was called in to, help as a physician, he said, let's go back to that, what we call in Ayurveda, dinacharya, the daily ritual of singing these Latin prayers for very short periods of time all throughout the day. And it was just a matter of weeks before the monks all regained their energy levels. So from there, Tomatis says there are just two types of sound. There's the sound that gives us energy and the sound that depletes our energy. So whenever I'm speaking in front of parents in particular who are saying, how do I get my kid not to listen to this harsh music? I just say there are just two types of sound. And when you tell your child, is this, ask yourself, is this environment, is this music giving you energy, or is it depleting your energy? That is the key for, self-prescription. So then we have a whole community of music therapists that have a lot of data on how music and now we have a developing community of those who are working with therapeutic sound of how both of these come together and heal the human body. Basically, we're looking at drops in cortisol because when the body is really stressed, it only responds on those mechanisms.
Right.
So when the body is relaxed, like when we get into meditation or a very, calming the heart rate, that's when we initiate the healing process.
Okay. So it's sort of a...
So it's a broad, that's a whole workshop in itself.
Getting you back in your natural rhythm, right? As a sort of interesting.
So the same, Duff and I talk about this a lot because we live in the forest. And for a while we were taking walks in the morning and we noticed our conversation was just everything about how we felt changed the minute we step into the forest. Like part of it was on the street and the last part of our walk for a half hour or so was in the forest. And it was like, you could just feel this sort of peacefulness settle over you, right? Everything just sort of washes away. And I guess sound is sort of mimicking that same sort of vibration that you would get from the forest.
Yes. The trees, the leaves, the roots are all, communicating with you. And I might just bring in the golden ratio again here. The geometry of the environment is really important. And so here you have the trees, you have the upper and the below. And we've all heard this saying, as above, so below. And so this is just so symbolic of walking in the forest and acknowledging the beautiful geometries that the forest gives to us, or, any natural environment. You could be at the sea, walking on the sand, and, it.
As opposed to being in a box all day, locking yourself in a box and wondering why you're out of sync with the world around you.
So you do, it's called cymatics or cymatherapy. And I read in your book that cymatics is sound made visible. And so this is it taking sound therapy a step further? Can you talk about cymatherapy just a little and how that, just what is it and how it works on a human?
Well, it's Duff, you mentioned mandalas in the introduction. And so the mandalas and the yantras, come from the ancient traditions. And this is when those who were very attuned to the environment and spiritually coherent, could see and gave us these gifts of the yantras and so a yantra is basically a mantra made visible. So
okay.
Then when you think of that, so when I spent many years in the ashram and in spiritual pursuits. And when I came back to the United States and was running a meditation center, I had this experience in India, so my thing is I have all these mystical experiences. How does the mystic bring it to science? How do I explain that this is really valid, that I'm not just, some crazy kid that's naturally high all the time, right? So I always wanted to show, or I would show the meditation students the Sri Yantra, because there's a technique in India where gazing into this geometric form gives access to higher states of consciousness. And so this is the beauty. And so I always wanted all of the meditation students to be able to envision when they were chanting, even just a real basic, wonderful mantra like Om Namah Shivaya, how those words manifest in the oral cavity and are expressed in the outer environment, and to visualize, something like a yantra, and that it is everywhere. When you speak, of course, anything, but definitely powerful prayers like seed mantras, they permeate the atmosphere like nothing else. And so then later in my life, I became aware of Dr. Hans Jenny, a Swiss medical doctor and natural scientist, and his artwork. If you like trees and wildlife, you must see his artwork. Anyway, he is the first person to use modern technology to make sound visible. And this is a huge step forward in scientific research, because, when you're in the research lab, you make faster pace if you can control variables. So,
right.
The mystic is all about including everything and observing the interconnection. But when we go into the science lab, we want to know, okay, does this beget this, and then this, and then that? We're always trying to lay this foundation, which, by the way, a really great book that came out that really helped me in the 1970s was The Tao of Physics. So I love scientists who have a spiritual experience, and then they can explain it in scientific terms. And I read it, I go, yeah, that's it. But back to Dr. Jenny and cymatics, he coined the term cymatics. And that comes from the Greek word chema, which means wave. And when we watch his experiments, you can see visibly with your eyes, and this is so powerful, you can see the impact of sound, what it's doing to your body. And so when I'm able to show that to people now, you go, this sound is imprinting upon you at a cellular level. This messaging, we're interconnected. And when you're in a room full of people who are experiencing challenge and fear and loss, that is a totally different imprint than when you're in a room of people who are very connected with love and gratitude. And this is why years ago, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he was the first one to do the scientific research in Washington, D.C., of a group of meditators meditating to help change the outcome of crimes, or the crime rate. And so that was the first scientific evidence of that. But back to cymatics, when we can see the power that sound can impart, even with our breath, it's very powerful. And I'm going to take this into medicine just a bit, because that's kind of where my field has taken me. Just 10 years ago, there was a biomedical team at the University of Missouri who developed a photoacoustic device that you breathe into, and you can detect as few as 10 cancer cells in the breath.
Wow.
So, we are really on a wonderful wavelength here of combining sound diagnostically, scientifically, and this is an ancient tradition that, everything we read about in the Vedas, in Ayurveda, if you read any books on Ayurveda, you go, well, gosh, that they just discovered this last year, and there was an article published on it.
Right.
So it's really great. So there's cymatics. That is the science. Those are those experiments that show the power of sound. When I met a British osteopath, he was doing cymatic therapy. And when I first met him, I thought he was talking about taking particular sounds and making them visible and somehow or another putting people in that environment. That is not what he was doing, because that was my job. I found out that was my job. Once you have the vision, you go, oh, that hasn't been done yet. Okay, I guess I'm up. But what he had done is work with a collaborative group of scientists and researchers after the Second World War. And they had identified a body of work of specific sound frequencies that help to support the physical body. And so I named that. So I tried to make a distinction between cymatics, the science of making sound visible, and the therapeutic application. So I then started with cymatherapy. So all of my work today is under the umbrella of cymatherapy, but I cannot leave cymatics because that is my root from childhood, of understanding, of experiencing directly the vibration and the geometries of sound, because I could see it in the church.
That's wild. One of the things I read in your book that kind of blew my mind, I thought that, you were talking about how we can now see sound with technology. And so I thought that was a brand new thing until I read about your, the Rosalind motet. And you were talking about how, can you explain that a little bit? Because I will destroy it if I try. Can you just give us a little, just explain the Rosalind motet? Because I thought it was beautiful.
Sure. Gosh, that's great. If you ever get a chance to go to, Edinburgh and stop off, the Rosalind Chapel is not far from the airport there, actually. But this is related to that wonderful golden ratio that all of the Gothic cathedrals were built upon. And so the Rosalind Chapel is this same type of architecture, but it's much smaller. It's not real large. And in the arcs of the chapel, there are cubes that have different notations on them. They're different, we'll say, geometries, very simple geometries. And on that pillar, right underneath that arc, is an angel with a harp, and the angel's fingers are pointed to certain keys. And so there's a father-son team. They live in the higher realms now. Tommy and Stuart Mitchell, and they decoded those cubes with the connection that they made with that angel pointing to those keys. And they created the Rosalind motet. And if you listen to it, I know it must be available online, but it's very haunting of 15th century music. And when you when I close my eyes and listen to it, it really takes you to that time, that experience of life in that environment. And anyway, it's beautiful. I highly recommend it. And the last time I was at Rosalind, so many people, it kind of became quite famous with Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code.
Uh-huh.
So they were inundated with all these tourists. And as a matter of fact, I was there one time when they were just finishing filming.
Oh, wow.
I said, what do you mean I can't get into the chapel? I said, but anyway, so they have a wonderful gift shop and a tour guide. And
so it's been going on for a while, all of the, like the visuals, the visual component of sound and music and
centuries.
Yeah.
Millennia. If you go
We're just now discovering it.
Yeah. So if you go to India, and so this was my, in college, I became aware of Eastern philosophy and was in a searching mode. And of course, I tell people that people who don't understand meeting a guru or a teacher of spiritual enlightenment, when they don't understand, I just say, well, when I was in college, I learned that there were wise and holy men and women in the East who knew the secrets of the universe. And I wanted to go there and find out from them directly, from someone who really knows the secrets of the universe. And so anyway, that, a bit of my story of meeting Swami Muktananda.
It's an amazing story.
You are in a temple in India, they have a different type of geometric formation that they're using. It's a different type of architecture, and it is all built on mathematical logarithms. And when you go into those temples and you're in the dome, so to speak, if it's a large enough temple, there are other domes, but if it's a very small temple, there's usually just one dome over like the Shiva Linga or some altar. But when you place yourself under the dome, for me, there is this sonic realignment. It's like you're going to the ultimate chiropractor or the ultimate cranial therapist. I mean, you have this, or I have, I know everyone is different. And so when I am under these domes, I can just feel this tweaking. It's blissful.
It's so interesting because if you look at all across Southeast Asia, all the geometry of the temples, like it's clearly, you can see the music in it if just look at them, the gracefulness of the design. Even Russian Orthodox, all the Indian stuff, and then we get here, we get to the Enlightenment, and the next thing we know, everything is a rectangle. Or everything is a square with a triangle on top of it. And no wonder we're more distant from the spirit in the modern West than, earlier cultures. Our buildings aren't making it easy for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And but I would like to just point out one thing, there are two sides to every coin.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the shift in time. If you look at cycles, a shift because when there's a change in the pattern, and that is really what cymatics is about observing patterns and becoming aware of the patterns within our own psyche and our own physicality. But when we look at it collectively, and the buildings are more to the square, that changes our way of perception.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that a good thing? It has its benefits. But like you're saying, we sort of lost touch. We went too far maybe that way. And when we look at trying to maintain balance,
well, it's like mastering nature or being part of nature. It's helped us master nature, right? We've got it under our boot heel now to some degree, right?
So we
so we think. But we can, build machines and planes and skyscrapers and all this stuff. So yes, but as you say, the other side would be being more part of it and the music of it, which doesn't reverberate inside a box as well as it does. We went to, we went to Willie Nelson's 90th birthday in April, and it was at the Hollywood Bowl. What a beautiful sound experience. Out of like a shell up into a hill. Whatever it is that's in the design of that place, it sounded like you were indoors with a super high audio system. It was crystal clear from a distance from the stage, where you're normally, if you're outdoors and you were that far from the stage, it'd be dissipated by the time it got to you. It was like we were in it. It was amazing.
I've noticed just in my dome, I have a greenhouse dome. And in the morning when I go out there, I usually will play some sort of chant, like the Guru Gita, or like a Sanskrit prayer of some sort. And a lot of times I will put my phone down and then I can't find it because you can't quite tell where the sound is coming from. It sounds like it's behind me and it'll be on the other side of the dome. So there's just something about the way that particular shape transmits sound. It kind of blew my mind. Now that I'm used to it, it doesn't freak me out so much. But I was kind of like really surprised the first time it happened. But let's
before we forget here, let's get to the devices.
Yes.
You've created and been part of creating devices that administer sound frequencies to the body. We were talking about this today, and so A, we'd love to know about the devices, but B, what is different from applying sound frequencies to the body than going to a concert, which is, there are frequencies being applied to your body. So tell us about the devices and then sort of what's different than just sort of being immersed in some other kind of sound.
Great question. Thank you. So the devices that I created, first of all, they're the frequencies. And so there's a frequency for every part of the body. And so in the body of work that I have in my devices, each code has 5 frequencies. So it's like this special quintet playing to your liver.
Wow.
Another special quintet playing to your gallbladder, and another special quintet playing to your pancreas, to your thyroid, to, et cetera. And so first of all, there are those 5. And I'll go off a little esoterically on the 5 because we have the golden ratio, as the universe can be explained by the physicist himself said, you can explain physics of the universe through the golden ratio. So there's that 5 and these geometric patterns. And you said you had seen my book. So all of those pictures, cymaglyphs, we call them, are of 5 frequencies in their different phasing for that particular code. And in that particular code is to strengthen the etheric sheath. And we can talk about the etheric sheath if you want to know more about that. But let me finish about the device. So there are 5 specific frequencies for each part of the body. And I have created different protocols or channels within the devices that help support each of these different body systems. For the digestive system, for the immune system, for the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, respiratory system, et cetera. And so I use a special transducer. Here's the special sauce. I have a special transducer that's on a special plate that is very targeted to getting the sound into the physical body. So when you're going to a concert, you have all this sound out here and you're taking it in primarily through the auditory cortex. you are feeling it through the skin. But when we're trying to make a physiological change in the body, we really need to get it. We need the skin conduction. And then, of course, this has to do with the hydration level of your body. We always recommend that people hydrate before and after, because sound is amplified then. And we live in a day right now where people, they don't really want to do a 6-week protocol. They want to turn it on and be fixed right now. We sort of got into that with modern medicine, where you go to the doctor, he gives you a prescription, you take the pill, and 24 hours later, you're new, so to speak. But anyway, so it takes a while for the sound to move or transition the cells into their happy state. And there are actually scientific terms for that. There's the G0 and the G1, G2. Anyway, state that the cells go to sleep when they're very stressed. And so when they're hearing nice music, and so this can be music that you're listening to as well, at a concert, because remember when you were young and you went to a rock concert and it was just like really great, but then, after a couple hours you go, oh, hey, my cup is full. Now I need to go sleep it off. So that's your body responding to that particular type of sound. But with my devices, they're very targeted sound to help get the body back on track.
And it's through the feet, right?
Yes. So when I first started studying with Dr. Manners, a British osteopath that I was passed the baton from, he was using a device sort of like if you ever go to an ultrasound therapist or an ultrasound technician and they're using a wand to get right. So he would use a device with a wand. And so you would have to hold it on that particular part of the body. And so initially I created a unit for him, a new invention, with technology, it changes. And then after a while, the parts become obsolete. So you have to redo. And so he really wanted a device similar to what he had been using. And so I created that device. And I'm just like everybody else. I want to be healthy but I don't want to do the work. So, I mean, I got my little routine that I do every day, with the supplements and all that. But, I would have to sit there and hold the device. And then so after a while, I wouldn't use the device. And then people would call me and they would say, I've got to tell you about your device and what it's done for my family. And they would tell me these most amazing healing stories. And I would be taking that in and I would go, I got to get one of those devices, forgetting, I go, oh, I make that device and I'm not using it. Crazy, right? But anyway, this is a true story. I'm confessing. So then when those parts were becoming obsolete, I had this thought, like, what would you do, Mandara, to use this device every day? I'm listening to all these people with phenomenal responses. This clearly is working. Why am I not using it? So I had some study in Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, and the portals of the feet are really powerful entry points. So I thought, why don't I make a platform that you can put your feet on? So that's how that device came into being. And it has become so successful. People absolutely love it because it's easy to use. They can sit back and be comfortable in a chair and use it through the bottom of their feet. I have research that shows that it goes to all parts of the body instantly, relieving inflammation and stress. And, a picture is worth 1,000 words. People will say, well, I think I feel something. But when you see it on an ultrasound or thermography or something like that, you go, wow, that is happening to me. So that's pretty powerful. And so I feel very fortunate to be able to help people in this way.
And I have one more question real quick. Could you just touch on the 5 frequencies? You mentioned that there's 5. What's the significance of 5? I know there's 5 elements, but that's about all I know. Could you talk about that just a little?
5 is really prevalent and when you go for your walk tomorrow morning in the forest, just look at how many leaves or petals or stems are 5. It's
Okay.
pretty, once you start paying attention to it, wow. And then if you look at architecture that you really like, that is, anyway, many things all throughout, you resonate with 5. So this is an interesting journey. When I was with Dr. Manners, I asked him, I said, why 5? How did you and your group come up with 5 frequencies? Because we have a lot, of people out there who are, using 1 frequency or 2 frequencies, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, right? I said, how did you come up with 5? And he said, well, we tried 1, we tried 2, we tried 3, we tried 4, and we almost gave up, but 5, we hit it. And it was really cut. So I was not satisfied with that. And so I started looking at all of the 5 in our natural world. And then in Ayurveda, we have the 5 koshas. I don't know if you've ever heard of the physical body and the 4 subtle bodies.
Yes.
And so that was a really key thing for me, particularly when I first started working with the device and the sound frequencies. And so I'm going to share this very short story with you to prove this point or share with you my experience that was pretty profound. So I had this suspicion that these 5 frequencies were working not just on the physical level. Mm-hmm. So so there was this woman who came to me, and in the beginning, I was giving sessions to, had a clinical type practice, but this was for anybody who wanted to come who had pain, because according to the FDA, my devices relieve pain and stress. So I was looking for pain relief. And so this woman came to me, and she was in her 50s. She's an artist. The reason she was experiencing pain is because she was a breast cancer survivor. And in the reconstructive surgery, they had stapled the prosthesis to her chest wall, and the staple was causing her pain. And so, from the Ayurveda perspective, we look at the body as a whole. Ayurveda deems dis-ease or dissonance as an opportunity. So we look for the opportunity. Of course, the large opportunity is the spiritual opportunity, but, we're looking at the opportunity on the physical level here. And so in her intake, I asked her, I said, because for those who know that in the natural medicine world, particularly of Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, there is the philosophy that dis-ease begins in the outer fields, in the subtle bodies. And by the time it manifests in the physical body, this is your body saying, this is the 2x4 for you. At first it was a feather. Then it was a hammer. And now it's the Mack truck. So anyway, I asked her, I said, in my training, we always ask about the emotional component. When you were experiencing your breast cancer, were you going through any emotion? She goes, oh, yeah, I know about all that. She said, I forgave him. So she is telling me that she had done the work to release whatever that caused this physical manifestation. So I said, oh, great, wonderful. So anyway, she has the 30-minute session for pain relief. She gets up, she says, oh, I feel a little woozy. I said, okay, here, have this glass of water. I said, you go sit on my sofa and I have the next person coming in. So anyway, the long story short, she finally leaves and I said, listen, I want you to contact me either by phone or email and let me know how you're feeling, because I'm thinking, she had a big shift. Sometimes, I can see big things happening when people are experiencing this sound, and she had one. So anyway, I didn't hear from her for 3 days. Finally, I got her on the phone and she said, let me tell you about that sound. That I drove from your place straight to my artist studio, and I have been painting for 3 days solid. I've painted my whole fall collection. I can't wait for you to come and see it. And I said, phew, okay, great. As a healthcare provider,
Wow.
you usually have pretty good outcome. Or
You like that kind of testimonial, right?
Every now and then.
It'll make you paint for 3 days.
But here's the thing. When I went to her exhibits, they're all variations of the Buddha.
Wow.
And so I said to her, oh gosh, I didn't realize, you follow a Buddhist tradition. And she goes, I don't. She said, I'm Italian. She said, I've never done the Buddha before. But so I'm telling you this because of the 5 and the 5 bodies, the 5 koshas. So when we clear all of those bodies, we have when the pain goes away, all of a sudden we have this creative energy and we go straight to what? The spirit, in my belief, the spiritual. And so in our culture, we see Buddhas everywhere, and they symbolize peace and calm, things we need more of. Right. So, we have even, the most fundamental religious people who have a Buddha,
Everyone.
in their guest bedroom, right? So
it's funny you say that, because in 2020, when I was about to do this other book, something cracked, and when I wrote Tickled, it was basically that. It was suddenly that was the topic on my mind, and it had never been there before. And I think your point is correct. It wasn't really the result of a process of volitional seeking. I removed something that had been blocking my view, and suddenly I had a better view. And I was like, I know what I need to write about now.
Thank you. That's awesome.
So
Mandara, we are running out of time here. Listeners, we got to, you can check out her website. It's called Cyma Technologies, CYMA technologies.com. There's a lot, her book is there, presentations, articles, stuff about the devices. I think because we obviously have more to talk about here, Joey, we need to get ourselves to Augusta, Georgia somehow and come back and do show our paintings of the Buddha. Right? So we'll return with Mandara Part 2, which will be partly an artistic presentation of all of our paintings. This has been wonderful and illuminating, and my God, you are so articulate and clear. It lands.
Thank you.
It lands like a beautiful sound.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us, Mandara, and we're gonna have you back here. So don't stray too far, because we got to get in touch again.
We just scratched the surface, barely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
I think.
Wow.
I have like 100 more questions. It's really wild.
It all makes complete sense. It's like what we end up because our senses operate independently of each other, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
The eye and the ear and the nose and the skin, What's the fifth one? I don't even know.
Sight, hearing. Did you get hearing? Smell, taste, touch, taste.
So because they operate independently of each other, right? We don't often think about the fact that everything is form, everything is sound, everything is whatever, and it's just you need to rethink how it's all one thing. So she's talking about changing what we think of as the physical using the sound, which we normally are like, what? No. But it's ultimately all the same thing in the end, right? It's you want to get to if you can reduce it. And so she's basically figured out how to get inside you via frequency. It's great. And we all know from music and everything, we know that it works.
Right.
We just don't know how well it works.
Or how to necessarily apply it, right? Like, it's like you can listen to a CD, but how do you apply sound to your body, right? To heal it. Like we used to have crystal bowls when Betty and I had the wish fulfilling tree store. We had crystal bowls. And when you would play those, like they're, you can feel it in every single part of you, but you don't come across that every day.
It's really amazing. I'm excited to get my feet into one of those machines. All right, so I got one for you here.
All right.
A little balsacar. This is not traditional.
Matt would not approve.
That would not approve.
Okay.
But I was reading about it today, and I just find it fascinating. So the Vedantas talk about duality a lot, like that we live in under the illusion that there is subject object, us versus them. We have this sense that we are a separate being and that everything outside of the body mind is different from us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we make objects of those things. And but in reality, it's all one thing, and what you're looking at is sort of a mirrorization of the self. We won't go into that. But Balskar was talking, he says, in wanting to see our face in the mirror, like an actual mirror,
mm-hmm.
we make of our face an object, meaning in the mirror, a thing that you can look at, that is independent of the seer. Right? So when you look in a mirror, you think you're looking at yourself, but because of the way a mirror works, right? You're not actually looking
at yourself
inward. You're looking at a thing, which is a appearance, right? And so think of it, because if you can look at a reflection in a mirror, just like you can look at a book or a tree, right? You could turn, if the mirror is beside you, you're like, oh, there's me in the mirror, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything that can be objectified like that cannot be what you are, right? Because you are the subject. You are not the object. So you are not what you are looking at in a mirror. When you look in a mirror, you're not looking at yourself. Right?
You're looking at the thing that you think is yourself.
You're looking at the thing that you think is yourself. And what you actually are is that which is looking. You are
right.
the looking itself. And it's so funny because if someone says, what do I look like? And you go look in a mirror and it's like, well, I'm looking at myself in the mirror. It's like, no, you're not. You are looking at a mirror.
Right.
Right.
Anyway. It's a bit of a mind bender when you get into you're looking itself, because then you have like the act of seeing, right, and the subject and the object, and how they're all both part of the seeing. So you can get a little mind twisted in that, I think. Yeah.
That's the whole goal here, right? We're trying to twist in order to untwist.
Right.
Okay, so back to I have great news.
All right.
To all the people who've written letters complaining over the past several weeks, we have some Oribindo back to close this episode. Apologies to all of you who have been missing him. So Mandara was talking about at the very beginning there, and when she was saying it, I got all excited. I sort of lost track of what she was saying for a little bit because I was like, this is perfect. I picked the perfect Oribindo quote. He said, when mind is still, then truth gets her chance to be heard in the purity of the silence. Truth cannot be attained by the mind's thought, but only by identity and silent vision. Truth lives in the calm, wordless light of the eternal spaces. She does not intervene in the noise and cackle of logical debate.
Wow. That is perfect. He's so good. It's true.
Right.
You just got to be. Just be.
Sri Aurobindo, thank you very much. Mandara Cromwell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joey of Rockledge, thank you very much. We
Duff.
will be back with you in a week.
Thank you, Duff. Bye-bye. You've been listening to How to Tickle Yourself with your host, Duff McDonald, and me, Joey of Rockledge. You can help us by liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast with others. You can talk to us and see what else is happening on Instagram and Facebook at How to Tickle Yourself. This program was recorded in Studio B of the historic Rockledge Recording Studio. Right Here, Right Now, our original 16-part theme music, was written and recorded by the legendary Paul Reddick and Kyle Ferguson of the Sidemen, with Steve Mariner on bass and drums and in the mixing room. This podcast is produced and distributed by Storic Media. Our editor is Oscar Desiderio. Our producers are Kristen Verbitsky and Chuck Labella. For more information, visit storicmedia.com. That's STORIC media.com.